a biscuit snapped in two, revealing more than crumbs. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Your words always make these mysteries more alive. Let's begin. If you've ever seen Nero Wolfe glare at a plate of food, you'd know it's a look that could blister the paint off a wall. Luckily for Fritz, our live-in chef and the only man alive who can serve Wolfe without trembling, the glare wasn't aimed at him this time. It was aimed at a biscuit. Yes, a biscuit. Half of one, to be precise. The afternoon had been routine enough for our household. Wolfe was stationed in his oversized chair behind the desk, browsing through an obscure volume on Balkan horticulture. Fritz was in the kitchen humming something that might have been Viennese, and I was across from Wolfe reviewing notes from a dull surveillance job that had earned us just enough to keep the lights on and the orchids warm. Then the plate arrived. Biscuits, golden and perfect, or so I thought. Wolfe picked one up, examined it as if it were a rare coin, and applied pressure with his thumb and forefinger. The thing broke clean in half with a snap. "Phooey," he muttered, dropping the pieces back onto the plate. Now, I've seen Wolfe launch into dissertations over the improper presentation of sauerkraut, so I knew better than to interrupt. He picked up another biscuit, gave it the same test, and sure enough, crack, two halves. "Archie," he said, low and ominous, "this is sabotage." "Sabotage?" I leaned forward. I thought it was just a snack. "Biscuits do not break so," he declared, the way a king might pronounce death on an unfortunate courtier. "They yield, they flake." To fracture, this indicates interference. I almost asked if he wanted me to call the FBI pastry division, but I kept my wit holstered. Wolfe wasn't in the mood. He summoned Fritz, who appeared with his apron spotless and his expression polite. "Fritz," Wolfe said, lifting one broken half like a piece of courtroom evidence. "Explain." Fritz took the biscuit, turned it over, and frowned. Not his usual frown, mind you. This was deeper, tinged with embarrassment. They were perfect when I placed them on the tray. I swear it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then, between your kitchen and this office, something occurred. That was my cue. I stood, brushed an imaginary speck off my jacket, and said, "If you're suggesting someone tampered with the sacred snack on its 5-foot journey from stove to desk, I'll check the hallway." I did just that. No open windows, no footprints, no lurking biscuit snatchers. I came back to report a clean corridor, but Wolfe wasn't satisfied. He was staring at the plate like it had just insulted his ancestors. "Archie," he said slowly, "we have had intrusions before. This is of a piece." "Hold on," I said. "Somebody sneaks into the brownstone, risks my charming company. And what do? Break your biscuit in half? If this is a crime, it's the pettiest I've ever seen." He closed his eyes. "Do not be dense. This is a message, a deliberate disturbance of the inviolable now. You might think Wolfe was overreacting, but here's the truth. The brownstone is his castle, his temple, his world. Disturbing it, even with something as small as a tampered biscuit, was enough to trigger the same response as a knife in the dark. He tapped the edge of the desk. "We will have a caller, Archie." Soon he said it with such certainty that I didn't bother asking how he knew. I just sat back down, took out my notebook, and braced myself. If there's one thing I've learned about Nero Wolfe, it's that the universe has a nasty habit of sending trouble through our front door right after he predicts it. And sure enough, at 4:17 p.m., the doorbell rang. At 4:17, I opened the door on a woman who looked like she had learned to apologize with money. She was early 30s, cool as a cocktail, and wearing a charcoal suit that said she understood quarterly reports better than people. The eyes were precise gray, the mouth had two settings, competent and tired. She had a folded paper bag tucked under one arm like contraband, And when she gave me her name, Tamsin Hargrove, I watched the bag shift an inch closer to her ribs. People who bring parcels to Nero Wolfe almost never bring anything he wants. "I need Mr. Wolfe," she said. Not to see him, just need, as if he were an appliance. "You and 6 billion others," I told her. "Luckily, 5,999,000,000 of them haven't found the bell." "Come in," I led her past and took her hat, which was imaginary. She didn't remove the suit of armor, but she did glance toward the hall like she was measuring distances. I've escorted jittery callers who thought the rug might open, but this was a different flavor. She wasn't scared of the brownstone. She was worried about contaminating it. Wolfe didn't rise, of course. He doesn't for coronations. He was in his chair, fingers tented, eyes hooded. The plate with the fractured biscuit halves held its ground on the desk like Exhibit A. I got the sense he had left it there on purpose, which, given Wolfe, was like saying the moon had made a plan to rise. "Miss Hargrove," I announced. "She needs you." "Everyone does," he murmured. "Good afternoon." She sat on the red leather chair to my right and set the paper bag on her knees. The bag crackled. She didn't open it. She didn't even look at it. She looked at the plate on Wolfe's desk, and I saw her face change by degrees the way a photographer pulls a filter, hard, then focused, then something like relief that made no sense until she spoke. "Oh," she said softly. "They were right." "Who?" I asked. "The ones who told me you would notice the difference." She inclined her head toward the plate. "Before I said anything. If you think it flatters a man like Wolfe to be told he noticed something, it doesn't. It offends him that someone thought he might not." He gave her a lift of eyebrow measured in microns. "You have brought me a prophecy." "Spare me. What have you brought that is tangible?" She put a hand on the bag at last and opened it carefully. Inside were 3 biscuits. No, I'll be precise. 3 biscuits worth of shards. Some big halves, some smaller fragments, and a drift of crumbs. She set the bag on the edge of the desk with the same queasy respect people use for urns. "I run operations for Hargrove Foods," she said. "You've never heard of us, but you've eaten us. We supply baked goods to hotels and 2 national cafe chains. In 2 weeks, we're launching a new product, Hargrove Hearth Biscuits, a premium line. We built the campaign around consistency. We promised—" She hesitated, then grimaced. "We promised they won't break under pressure. I'm not immune to a good pitch." I glanced at Wolfe's plate, at the clean fracture line that had started the sermon, and saved my wisecrack. She didn't need help making the point. "Someone is making sure that claim fails," she went on. "We do test batches before a launch. 2 days ago, we loaded a tasting flight for a press preview. Every box was checked by me personally. Each tray had a dozen biscuits. At the venue, half of the biscuits fractured with a neat snap as soon as someone picked them up. Not crumbled, snapped, exactly like that." A nod at Wolfe's plate. The bloggers used the word ironic in all caps. Wolfe's mouth said nothing, but his eyes did a little arithmetic. "Production flaw." We looked. Nothing in the bake. "We test moisture, fat distribution, lamination, bake time." The samples left our kitchen perfect. Something happened in transit or at the venue. Then this morning I came into my office and found— She tapped the bag. "This on my desk, next to a note." She took a card from her jacket and placed it on the blotter like a minor sacrifice. I leaned over to read. It was simple block print, black marker, tidy and unhurried. "If he can feel it at home, you'll feel it everywhere. Stop now. You presume," Wolfe said, "that he is me." She didn't flinch. "Yes, the person who left that had to know you would notice, and that you would take it personally if someone interfered with your food in your own house." "Someone did," Wolfe said. "Archie." "I gave the corridor a clean bill," I said. "No cracks in the universe." Fritz swears on his reputation and a pan of cassoulet that the biscuits yielded then. Somewhere along the parade route, a magic wand turned flake to shatter. Tamsin Hargrove's eyes went to Fritz's domain like she was sorry the kitchen existed. I didn't want to bring this to you. I don't like theater, gestured at the bag. But my CEO asked what our exposure was, and our counsel asked what our lawsuits would be, and our brand director asked why we were cursed. None of them asked who. That's the only question I want answered, who? Wolfe repeated, tasting the pronoun. And perhaps why. Though motive is the bantam that struts earliest, it is the least reliable. May I see the note? I asked. Wolfe gave me a nod. The card stock was standard, the ink was fresh, and the smell was what you get from a marker that thinks it's a paintbrush. I held it up to the light, not because I expected watermarks, but because people like to see you doing something. The fibers were cheap and unhelpful. You will give me names, Wolfe said. Anyone who could have influenced production, transport, staging, or your office. Anyone who has reason to harm you, your position, or your firm. Anyone who has spoken the word unbreakable with a snare. She listed them calmly, like she had been doing it in her head since dawn. Martin Pyle, CEO, Yara Stowe, Brand Director, Rohan Bell, Head of Product, Alicia Medeiros, Logistics, Gavin Creel, Events Contractor, and one more, Silas Debris, owner of Croft and Debris, our primary competitor on the cafe side. She paused. Silas dated me in college, briefly. We are not in touch. You could have put a tea saucer on the silence that followed. Wolfe's eyelids came down and up. I do not facilitate vendettas over failed courtships. You won't have to, she said evenly. If Silas is involved, it won't be because of me. It will be because he is very, very good at hatred. That got a fractional turn of Wolfe's head. He dislikes adjectives that pretend to be data, but he respects people who can measure their enemies. He pushed the broken halves on his plate together with a fingertip until they almost met, then let them fall apart. You understand my terms, he said. I do not go out. You will not ask me to. I require a retainer of $25,000, applied against a fee commensurate with the nuisance you introduced to my life. Mr. Goodwin will act for me. You will not lie to him. She nodded. Done. It was the fastest I've seen anyone agree to pay for the privilege of being insulted. Archie, Wolfe said, Fritz will bring coffee. You will take Miss Hargrove to the front room and extract a chronological account, from the moment the test batch left her oven to the moment she found that vulgar note. You will also ascertain who had opportunity to enter this house between 3 o'clock and the appearance of Fritz's tray. I said, the mail came at 3:42. I brought it in. A courier dropped off an invoice at 3:51 from Brancusi's Orchids, Theo's order. And a man selling pamphlets tried to make a pitch at 4, and I declined his tender devotion at the threshold. Those are your door events. Inside, only me, Fritz, you, and the orchids upstairs. The orchids, Wolfe said, with more civility than he offers most humans. Very well. Miss Hargrove, one more question. Why come to me at all? Your company has counsel. Your counsel has investigators. You have money. Because whoever did this wanted you involved, she said, and for the first time a crack showed that had nothing to do with biscuits. And because if they can reach into this house and make you feel it, I needed to see if you would care. Wolfe let out a breath like a judge postponing doom until after lunch. I care, he said. I resent. Fritz entered with the coffee. The aroma put a lacquer on the air. Tamsin Hargrove folded her hands and looked smaller for a second, then collected herself. I walked her to the front room, notebook ready, while behind me I could feel Wolfe not moving, settling instead, the way a mountain decides which side to let the wind push. The brownstone had been disturbed. If that was the goal, congratulations to the saboteur. They'd jostled a stubborn planet. The problem with jolting a planet is that sooner or later it rolls back. If you want to know why clients talk to me more than to Wolfe, it's because I make it painless. In the front room, I put Tamsin on the sofa with the coffee and the notebook and set the metronome. From oven to humiliation, I said. Tick it off. She had the rhythm all ready. 10:10 a.m., last tray out. Quality check with Rohan. Packed by Alicia's team at 10:40, 12 trays, sealed cartons, tamper tape signed by me. 11:05, loaded into van. Driver was our regular, Ortiz. Alicia witnessed. 11:55, arrival at Gramercy Hall, rear entrance. Gavin's crew checked us in. 12:10 to 12:30, staging in the green room. 12:40, Yara insisted we swap the tasting plates for mat boards. Photography. 1 o'clock, press admitted. 1:12, first snap. By 1:25, our hashtag was a funeral. Chain of custody on the green room? Gavin's team only, supposedly. But Yara and Rohan were in and out. I was on the floor, running timing after, I said. The note. Last night. I left at 9:15 p.m., back at 7:35 this morning. Office was locked both times. The bag and card were on my desk, centered like a dare. Building security shows 2 entries overnight, cleaning crew at 2 a.m. and our CEO at 5:40 a.m. He runs there before sunrise. He didn't go near my floor. Keys. Security, me, Pyle, Alicia. The cleaners have a master for the common spaces, not tenants' suites. Anyone else touch the cartons after you signed the tape? She shook her head, precise. We weighed them at pack and at unload. No change. From the office doorway, Wolfe's voice drifted in, lazy as smoke. Miss. Hargrove, those mat boards. New or borrowed? Borrowed from the venue. Gavin said stone reads better than porcelain. Stone, Wolfe said to the ceiling, and let it sit there like a mood. I walked her through the last 4 weeks, contracting with Gavin, the decision on that won't break line, any recent resignations, fights, romances, praying mantises. We built a neat little ladder of reasons for each name she had given, and by the time I let her breathe, I could see why she'd brought the problem to us. She didn't dramatize. She didn't plead. She laid it out like a surgeon who doesn't need to raise her voice because the scalpel is doing fine. Wolfe called me in. He hadn't moved, apart from rearranging the biscuit fragments into art and then back into evidence. You will go, he said, and you will not be distracted. At Hargrove, obtain exemplars of everyone's block print. Do not ask. Contrive. Secure a copy of the green room plan, the van's temperature log, and the tamper tape rolls. Lot numbers. And smell the stone boards. Smell. They are porous, he said patiently. Porous things take on neighbors. If some fool applied a conditioning agent to the surface, it may whisper still. Also, the tidy threat card uses an odoriferous ink. Your nose is adequate. Thank you, I said. I take my compliments any way they break. I got Tamsin a cab, tucked the bag of relics under my arm, and headed downtown to Hargrove Foods, which squatted in a glass box that was trying not to look like a glass box. The lobby gave me a receptionist who had learned to be diplomatic toward men with briefcases. I handed her my card and the version of the truth that works on receptionists, an appointment, a name, and the promise not to bleed on the furniture. Yara Stowe had a corner office and a whiteboard that had been assaulted by slogans. She wore black like it was a job requirement and smiled like it hurt molars. We're doing root cause, she said before I sat. We'll issue a statement about supplier anomalies and recenter the narrative. Good, I said. While you're centering, I need copies of the green room layout, the plate swap request, and the press list. She clicked her nails on the desk. Short, perfect, weapon grade. On what basis? On the basis that your company has hired Mr. Wolfe, and that if we don't get ahead of whoever did this, you'll be issuing statements from a smaller office. I glanced at the board. Bigger than breakfast, read one line, and beneath it a hurried stop using unbreakable, written in neat block capitals. I filed it, smelling the ink. Marker heavy. Plenty of people print in block. Plenty of people think capital letters hide character. They don't. She printed me what I asked and tried to find out if we were going to blame the plates. I told her I wasn't in the blaming business till after lunch. In the hall, I ran into Rohan Bell, who had the anxious dignity of a man whose formulas had just been called ugly in public. He had a sample biscuit in a Ziploc like a kidnapped child. "Moisture is within spec," he announced. "Laminate separation." His uniform. If they snapped, something altered interlayer adhesion post-bake. Cold shock, desiccant, solvent. There are ways that fit in a green room? I asked. Some, he said, and eyed my bag like he wanted to adopt it. May I? You may not, I said. But you can tell me if stone reads better than porcelain, makes your hair stand up. It makes my audit list longer, he said. Stone is variable. If someone treated it with oil or even wiped it with alcohol, the contact could change surface moisture, but that wouldn't produce a clean snap. A snap implies a brittle line. He showed me a photo on his phone of a cross-section. Then he glanced past my shoulder and dialed his expression down 2 notches. Martin Pyle, CEO, had arrived with a jogger's glow and a suit that cost what my father paid for a car in 1940. Pyle pumped my hand like he wanted to see what came out. We're aligned on solutions, he told me. We support Miss Hargrove in any external engagement, and we're discontinuing adjectives. Fine, I said. Have your logistics queen show me the van log, the tamper tape, and the loadout signatures. And I want an email to all asking for handwritten notes on any urgent actions, signed and printed. You can say your counsel wants contemporaneous documentation. I want a sample of block letters without tipping the game. He liked that. Executives like tricks if they think they invented them. He walked me to Alicia Medeiros, who sat in a bullpen surrounded by clipboards. Alicia was compact and exactly as patient as the math required. The van swap, I said. Why? Unit 2 compressor screamed at 1050, she said, checking a board. We took Unit 4. Same route, same driver. I've got temperature trace. Never left the band. Load out at ours. Check. Unload at Gramercy. Check. No one tampered with the tape on my watch. On anyone else's? Her mouth tucked. Gavin likes to be nimble. He handled boxes like props. And Miss Stowe made us move quick for that plate swap. I logged what I could, but if you want a ballet, hire a ballet. Gavin Creel looked like he had been born under a lighting rig. He had a pelican's case, a smile that worked stages, and the kind of friendliness that makes you check your pockets afterward. He walked me through his green room map with arrows and confidence. Stone boards, I asked. Venue standard. Everyone uses them. Vibe, what did you wipe them with? Food-safe sanitizer. Same as always. Show me the bottle you used. He shrugged, fished in the case, and produced a quart with a label I knew. I cracked the cap and took a breath. The usual tang, nothing exotic. The boards themselves, stacked by a wall, had the faint smell of a storeroom. Dust, detergent, lemon ghost. My nose isn't bad. It also isn't a gas chromatograph. Who was alone with the trays? I said. No one. He said too, fast then correcting. People moved in and out. It's an event. On my way out, I detoured to Tamsin's office. I wanted the desk where the dare had been left. Clean, squared, nothing sentimental. The trash had been emptied, the carpet vacuumed with military zeal. I bent to the lock, no scratches. I looked at the window, bolted. I looked at the paper blotter. There was a faint impression of block letters pressed hard enough to dent. I tilted it to the light. You'll... something. Everywhere. Not helpful, except that whoever wrote the card had pressed like they were trying to carve their certainty into the desk. My phone hummed. Fritz. Mr. Goodwin, he said, and I could hear flour in the voice. I cannot find the cream of tartar. I placed it left of the nutmeg this morning. It is now right of the mace. Call the newspapers, I said. He didn't laugh. I do not misplace in my kitchen. Someone has touched my shelf. I told him I was on my way, though I wasn't. Wolfe doesn't go out, but trouble finds ways to make him feel it. Somebody had put their fingers in our house and then signed a card about it. If you think moving a jar an inch is small, you haven't watched Nero Wolfe register it like a change in weather. The crack we were chasing wasn't only in a biscuit, it was in our air. When I got back to the brownstone, Fritz was in the kitchen standing like a soldier who'd lost a medal. He pointed to the spice shelf, and sure enough, the cream of tartar had switched allegiance from left of nutmeg to right of mace. To anyone else, that was trivia. To Fritz, it was treason. To Wolfe, it was an artillery round fired at his kingdom. Did you lock the kitchen? I asked. Always, he said, voice tight. I was upstairs with Mr. Wolfe's luncheon tray when it happened, which meant either Fritz was developing sudden absent-mindedness or somebody was walking around our house like it was a department store. I looked for scratches on the cabinet, smudges on the counter, footprints in the flour bin. Nothing. Whoever it was, they had the touch of a stage magician. Wolfe received my report with a grimace that could sour cream without lemon. He flicked the air with 2 fingers. Archie, enumerate. 2 biscuits tampered, delivered to us as Exhibit A. Bag of shards left in Hargrove's office with a card addressed by implication to you. Tamper-free cartons that broke like glass once they hit the event floor. A lineup of suspects who could stalk a corporate retreat. And now a spice jar 2 inches off its sworn station. Our phantom isn't clumsy. They're trying to prove a point. I can reach you anywhere, anytime. Bosh, Wolfe said, though not with full conviction. This is braggadocio, empty but not meaningless. If one can infiltrate this house and live, one can infiltrate a bakery line in mischief. He shifted in the chair, which is his version of a marching stride. Did you collect your specimens? I laid out the block letter notes from Hargrove's crowd, the sanitizer bottle Gavin had shown me, and the tamper tape lot numbers Alicia had produced. Wolfe glanced at each, lips tight. He dismissed the sanitizer with a sniff, shuffled the tape into a stack, and let his gaze linger on the handwriting samples. His lips pressed together as if he were tasting a sauce that wasn't balanced. Archie, he said, I require Saul. That meant the perimeter had to widen. Saul Panzer is the man you call when you need to know what people aren't saying, preferably while they still think they haven't said it. Wolfe doesn't spend a name like Saul lightly. I rang him. He answered on the second buzz, his voice calm and low. Work? Work, I said. Bring your ears and your shadows. Wolfe wants you to float through Hargrove Foods, brand, logistics, and the shiny CEO. Quiet listening, no rattling the bars. Somebody's been scribbling in block letters and sneaking in where they shouldn't. Tonight? Tonight, I confirmed. Wolfe, hearing me, waved me silent and closed his eyes. That's how he thinks. Shutting out the light so the mind has less competition. When they opened again, there was an extra gleam, the one that says he's already drawn a line through suspects we still think are possibilities. You will also visit Croft and Debris, he said, our rival suitor. Competitor, Archie. Rival implies romance. Debris is said to be both inventive and spiteful. Such men attract meddlesome employees. You will nose about, pretend to purchase, speak as a gourmand, note whether their ovens have the virtue of patience. Patience, huh? I'll see if the biscuits listen politely before breaking. He ignored that and reached for the phone himself. rare as a comet. He called Inspector Kramer, which meant he was ready to kick dust in the face of the law just to see if it stuck. I only heard Wolfe's end of it. Measured tones, precise phrasing, a request for any police notes about break-ins in the Gramercy district, even if nothing was taken. He hung up with a grunt that told me Kramer had said what Kramer always says. If you want the police to be errand boys, hire them uniforms. The evening stretched. Fritz went back to rearranging the shelves like a general patching his front lines. Wolfe settled into a book but didn't turn the page for long stretches. At 10, Saul phoned in. CEO Pyle has a morning pattern, Saul said. He enters the building with a duffel bag. Leaves it in his office until 9, then it disappears. Staff thinks he changes clothes after his pre-dawn jog. Today the bag vanished by 10. Cleaner says it wasn't in the bin. A bag, Wolfe murmured. Large enough for cartons, or only for shoes? Not cartons. Shoes, notebooks, maybe smaller boxes. Still of interest. Continue. Yara Stowe, the brand lead, keeps a drawer of calligraphy pens in her office. She prints campaign slogans in block, likes the sharp look. Paper stock's the same grade as your card. She shredded a draft after the preview fiasco. Cleaning crew said the bin was heavy with cardstock. I saw Wolfe's nostrils flare. He almost smiled, which on him is like thunder almost cracking. Useful, he said. Rohan Bell, Saul continued, is bunkered in the test kitchen. Works till midnight. Not sociable, but no whispers. Alicia Medeiros is solid. Staff likes her. Gavin, though, he's loose. Owes money on equipment rentals. Floats invoices. Venue staff say he asked for storage rooms off the record. Could fit a bag or two. Enough, Wolfe said. Observe further. Report tomorrow. Saul clicked off. I sat back. So it's either the pen queen or the prop man. Too glib, Wolfe said, but promising. I headed to Crofton Debris the next day under disguise of customer curiosity. Their showroom smelled like ambition with butter. Silas Debris himself was on the floor, shaking hands, showing teeth. He was thin, trim, polished, and when I said the word biscuit, he gave a laugh that cut corners. We heard about the catastrophe, he said, not hiding his grin. Tragic, tragic. Consistency is so hard, isn't it? Consumers never forgive. Yours don't break, I asked. Not unless we want them to, he said smoothly. Our bakers know discipline. That's when I knew Wolfe was right. Hatred, sure, but sharpened into glee. I stayed long enough to note their packaging, their tape rolls, their trays. Same suppliers, same van company. Too much overlap to be a coincidence. Back of the brownstone, I reported. Wolfe listened, chewing silence like a corpse. He looked at the biscuit halves still on the plate, untouched since day one. Archie, he said, we are being played with. And I loathe games where the other presumes to move first. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was personal. Someone had touched the brownstone, moved Fritz's jar, broken Wolfe's biscuit, and scribbled a challenge. That wasn't strategy. That was trespass. And trespass in our house has a cost. The first smart thing I did that morning was ask the orchids a question. Not directly, Wolfe would have called an ambulance, but by way of Theodore, who guards the plant rooms with the tenderness of a nurse and the temper of a buzzsaw. I went up, stood at the glass, and got the scowl. What? He demanded. Theodore likes humans best when they come with roots. Invoice from Brancusi's orchids yesterday, I said. $3.51. You sign for anything. He snorted. Brancusi doesn't deliver invoices without plants. And we have no order pending. Mr. Wolfe pays before they bloom out of guilt that lined up with a feeling I'd been carrying around since I mentioned the courier to Wolfe. The invoice hadn't had the right smudge of hothouse. It had smelled like toner. I took the paper from my pocket. Theodore glanced, dismissed it, and went back to clipping a spike with the concentration of a bomb squad. Downstairs, I slid the invoice across Wolfe's blotter. He didn't touch it. "Well?" "Fake," I said. "Theo says no order, no invoice. Whoever used Brancusi's name did it to stand on our stoop without being bounced. 3:51 is the minute Fritz was upstairs with your tray." "Poi," Wolfe said. There are gradients to his parfum eyes. This one was dark enough to use on shoe leather. He came in, he rearranged Fritz's spice, he touched the plate, he snapped a biscuit. Not to harm, merely to prance. "Sure," I said, "but Prancer's trip. He left a footprint even if he wore felt. He knew the brownstone, he knew about the orchids. That narrows it. We're not collecting random neighborhood show-offs. We're collecting someone who did homework." Wolfe stared at the biscuit relics like they might grow into a suspect if he loved them enough. Then he picked up the phone and called Lon Cohen. When Wolfe uses Lon, he's doing two things: informing the public and lying to it with the truth. He told Lon there would be a remedial tasting at Hargrove in 48 hours, and that Mr. Wolfe had agreed to attend by proxy. Translation, me. He made it sound inevitable that the second showing would either redeem the first or be the end of the line for everyone except the lawyers. He hung up and said, "We will provide bait." I thought we were going to be tasteful. "We will be both," he said. "Fritz will produce 24 biscuits that will not break under pressure if a rhinoceros sat on them. Miss Hargrove will place them in the same conditions as before. Our interloper will attempt to repeat his parlor trick. Meanwhile, Mr. Panzer will watch without blinking. You will provide him with eyelids. I love it when you're romantic," I said. "And here at home?" "Here," he said, "we will be dull. We will expect a second visit and record it with our memories. You will instruct Theodore to leave the glass door to room 3 unlocked for 5 minutes at 4 o'clock. Fritz will take a tray through the hall at 4:05. You will sit in the front room reading a magazine you will not enjoy, and you will ask Fred to be at the corner with a newspaper. Fred Durkin isn't as invisible as Saul, but a grown man who can be a street lamp without wires is a useful thing." I phoned him. He grunted assent. At Hargrove, the announcement produced exactly what Wolfe wanted: panic disguised as urgency. Tamsin didn't bother with the disguise. "We're inviting the same list," she said. "If we fail twice, we may as well sell the company to a glue manufacturer. What do you need?" "Everything you had," I said, "plus a security man who isn't on Gavin's Christmas card list. Keep the boards, don't swap anything. And tell your CEO he's not allowed to jog with a duffel." She twitched at that. "What does Martin's exercise routine have to do with anything?" "Maybe nothing," I said. "Maybe he likes to change shoes in private, or maybe someone is using his office as a post office. Anyway, humor me," she hummed. "There are executives who need you to be wrong so they can be right. Tamsin needed you to be right so she could make it stop. It's a difference you can build a bridge on." I drifted past Yara's office and admired the slogans like a tourist at a bad monument. One fresh line read, "Don't break, make." The letters were neat blocks with a peculiar confidence to the E, a top bar that wasn't quite horizontal. You don't convict on that kind of thing. It's not a fingerprint, but you file it. I asked her about the mat boards and got a lecture on visual texture that made me want to send flowers to porcelain. Gavin, cornered in the green room with his pelican case, had the breezy guilt of a lifeguard who had just watched a wave and hoped no one had drowned. "We'll run it tighter," he promised. "I'll put a man on the trays." "Put yourself," I said, "and do not store any bags in any room that isn't a room." The day of the second show, Fritz made biscuits that could have doubled as coasters and not embarrassed the furniture. I watched him pull the tray, watched him plate them, watched him set them on a trolley with all the solemnity he usually reserves for sauces. When he wasn't looking, I pocketed one. It went in my inside jacket pocket to travel to Gramercy as a control. At 3:55, I sat in the front room with a copy of a journal devoted to ornamental grasses. which is as close as I'll ever come to a good deed unpunished. At 4 sharp, there was a gentle click from upstairs that told me Theodore had obeyed and was already regretting it. At 4:02, the bell rang, male. At 4:04, a shadow crossed the frosted pane of the front door and didn't press the bell. At 4:05, Fritz's trolley creaked in the hall like the first sentence of a confession. I stood, adjusted my tie, and stepped into the entry. The corridor was empty. Fritz's back was to me, rigid. "Mr. Goodwin," he said quietly. "Do you see?" On the trolley, resting beside the plate, was a business card. I didn't touch it. I'd been hoping for a man with a hat. Instead, I got typography. The card read, "You still feel it." The same block print, the same neat black, the same absence of fingerprints suggested by its cocky relaxation. Whoever had left it had done it while we were watching and not watching. I didn't move, because Wolfe hates it when you pollute a scene with enthusiasm. I called his name, and in a minute he was there, a phenomenon that always feels like a stagehand raise the mountain through a trap. He looked once, and his lips made a line. "Theodore." "Room 3 is as I left it," Theodore said from the stair like a chorus. "No drafts. No damage." "Fred?" Wolfe asked me. I phoned. Fred was in his car half a block down. "No one came in or out that front in the last 10, he reported. "Back alley's clear." "Side gate latched, unless they tunneled, thank you," Wolfe said when I relayed. "We have a visitor who enjoys doors that are already open." "Servant entrance," I said, "or the basement bulkhead." Or he watched me unlock and timed the draft. Wolfe shook his head. "He is not invisible." He has anticipated I pocketed the card with a napkin and we went to Gramercy. The control biscuit in my pocket was whole and haughty. At the green room, the Hargrove trays sat like a jury. Gavin hovered, Yara prowled. Tamsin looked like she had been subtracting sleep and adding deadlines. I took my pocket biscuit, set it on a spare board, and pressed. It yielded like a gentleman. I took one of Fritz's new beauties from the tray, and pressed. It yielded. Then I asked Gavin to bring me one of the mat boards from the closet that hadn't been used. He fetched it. I set a biscuit on it. I pressed. It yielded. Saul drifted out of a wall. His chin dipped a millimeter. "Storage room had a man in it 10 minutes ago," he murmured. "Left by the dock. Cap, mask, gloves. Just a man being careful. Careful men make mistakes," I said. "What did he touch?" "Boards," Saul said, "and a little bottle." Gavin, hearing bottle, perked. "Sanitizer." Saul looked at him like a cat looks at a parakeet. "Not sanitizer. A dropper. Smelled sharp." I went to the closet, nose first. There are odors you learn in this line. Panic, cheap ink, someone else's coffee. This one was a thin, almost sweet bite, the whisper you get off a new shoe or a fresh tire. Solvent. On the edge of a board, there was a darker line, then paler wood where a wipe had hit. I touched it with the back of a finger. Dry. It takes a delicate hand to paint a seam where a biscuit will sit and then fracture where it meets the doctoring. I took a biscuit, set it so the seam lay under its middle, and pressed. Clean snap. No crumble. A sound like satisfaction for someone with a grudge. Tamsin closed her eyes like someone had confessed over a phone line. Wolfe wasn't there to incline his head, but I could feel his approval by proxy. It wasn't the whole story. It was enough story to bring the rest into focus. "Okay," I said. "Our parlor magician paints boards, not biscuits. He comes early. He works where Gavin stores his props. He uses a solvent you can buy in a hobby shop, and he enjoys our hospitality enough to drop calling cards in our hall. He knows Hargrove's rhythms and ours. Which one of your people thinks neat block letters are invisibility, Miss Stowe? Which one thinks storage rooms don't count as rooms, Mr. Creel?" No one answered. What we got instead was the smallest sound from behind us. the scrape of a duffel zipper. It came from a door marked staff only. Saul didn't move. He didn't have to. He had already placed the door in his pocket. Saul didn't have to tell me twice. When the zipper rasped in the staff door, his head tilted a degree that meant, "Don't crow, don't chase, let the fish feel the line." I let the door breathe open and a stock figure slid out. Cap, mask, gloves. The costume polite criminals have made their Sunday best. He carried a duffel like it belonged to the air, not to him, and he walked with the careful cadence of a man who has practiced being seen without being noticed. Saul drifted after him at a civilian pace. I stayed where the trays were because Wolfe had sent me to make evidence, not headlines. We did it properly. I called Tamsin, Yara, and Gavin over like they were about to watch a card trick they were going to hate. I set a biscuit on an unused board, centered it on that faintly darker aisle my finger had registered earlier, and pressed with 2 fingers the way a diner would. The sound, crisp, clean, satisfied, made Yara flinch. I took another biscuit, set it on the same board a 1/4 inch to the left, and pressed. It yielded and flaked into good manners. "Surface conditioning," I said. "A seam painted just where the weight will focus. Not all over. Too obvious. A line. If you did it while the boards were stacked, one swipe could mark a dozen edges. You needed access to where Gavin keeps his props, 10 minutes, a dropper, and a rag. And you needed nerve Gavin had the decency to color. We sanitize," he said feebly. "Everyone uses those closets." "Sure," I said, "and most of them don't bring hobby shop solvent to a tasting. You'll like this part, miss. Stowe, it plays well on camera. You promised what couldn't be promised, somebody decided to illustrate, and bloggers are generous with irony." Martin Pyle arrived on the sentence and tried on concern like a scarf. He listened to the demonstration with his jaw in the angle CEOs practice for depositions. "So it's external," he concluded. "Not our process." "It's someone's process," I said. "Maybe yours by contract." Tamsin didn't smile. "We'll control the boards ourselves," she said to Gavin and to me. "Do you want the closet sealed?" "I want it open," I said. "And I want every plate you use wiped with something dull and innocent in public view. Do not change a single thing we changed the first time. We're not fixing the environment, we're fixing the saboteur to it." My phone gave the smallest buzz. "Saul. Loading dock. North Alley. Following." Then another line. "Gym lot on 26th. He switched bags. Bags plural. I texted back a question mark, which was eloquent enough for me. Saul answered, dropped the duffel into the trunk of a black Model S. The plate belonged to a corporate lease registered to Hargrove. Driver unseen. Our man walked away with a smaller canvas tote, changed cap, went down into the station. Shoes, new, cheap, rubber, crepe. Gait. Not a runner. Shoulders say desk, hands say careful. I didn't bother asking if Saul had tried to grab the tote. If Saul doesn't pick a pocket, it's because he can do more with what's left inside it later. I pocketed the text and told Pyle, bland as oatmeal, "I understand your morning routine includes a gym. Keep the trunk in your sight." He didn't blink. He had prep. "Are you suggesting I import solvents in a duffel to ruin my own launch?" "I'm suggesting your car has admirers," I said. "You might want a less hospitable trunk." He gave me the smile people put on when they can't afford to look worried yet. Yara, meanwhile, had found an angle from which she could be offended without being implicated. "This proves the messaging wasn't the problem," she said. "We were right conceptually." The story was contaminated. "Everything's contaminated eventually," I said. "The trick is admitting it before the hero dies." I turned to Tamsin. "Alicia's logs, the tape lots. Keep them under your pillow. And one more thing. Who told you to come to Wolfe? You said they were right when you saw the plate." Who are they? She didn't answer immediately, which meant there was a name she didn't like owning. A writer at the Gazette, she said at last. Not Lon. Someone in food. She said when something touches Mr. Wolfe's domestic rituals he notices, and that if we wanted the right kind of attention, we should poke them. Poke, I said. Good. You got attention. Let's see if you like the kind we have left. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe heard it all while frowning at the invoice again as if it might confess a genealogy. He let me talk through Saul's report twice. On the third time he held up a finger. He switched bags, Archie. Where? Gym lot on 26th. His reward or his ritual, Wolfe said. If he left the duffel in a trunk that is accessible to your Mr. Pyle, there are two possibilities. Either Mr. Pyle is party to the movement of objects, or he is the closet your man uses because it is conveniently large and politely unlocked. Men like that, he meant men with cars and confidence, leave trunks open for valets in the world. Saul said corporate lease in the company name, I said, so any senior staff might have access. Possibly, Wolfe admitted, but I do not collect maybes. I arrange them until one protests. He leaned back, eyes closed, a position I've come to recognize as the prelude to something malicious and beautiful. This person, he said, does not attack your process. He attacks your promise. He chooses a method that humiliates the words won't break under pressure. He prefers a neat fracture to a mess. He writes in block. He enjoys staging. He leaves a card where a man like me will be forced to admit that he felt it. He knows the law of this house sufficient to use Brancusi's name to pass your threshold. He has a talent for proximity. All this points to vanity as much as to malice. Yara, I said, because if vanity had brand equity, she had cornered it. Or Gavin. He lives in proximity, and he owes not so fast, Wolfe said. Mr. Creel is sloppy, not vain. Miss Stowe is vain, but she is not nimble enough in the dark, and there is a third, Mr. Pyle. Vanity of control. You think the CEO would salt his own earth? I think executives play with scale the way children play with pine cones. What looks to you like catastrophe looks to them like a quarter-over-quarter dip that purchases a department. Or a person, meaning Tamsin, I said. If this tanks, operations becomes scapegoat. He let that settle. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a scent he wanted the room to remember. Then the bell rang. Fritz went, voices murmured, footsteps followed, quick and unwilling. Tamsin stood in the office doorway, one hand still on the jamb like the house might move if she let go. There's something else, she said to me, and then to Wolfe, because he demands respect even from people who can't afford it. Our competitor, Croft and Debris, their PR pushed a story this afternoon that they're launching Heritage Biscuits in 3 weeks. Same cafe chain we're negotiating with. They filed their trademark application last month. I glanced at Wolfe. Even he doesn't appreciate surprises he didn't predict. He opened one eye. Date of the filing. 2 days before we presented our campaign to the board, she said, which should have been confidential. Only if you live in nursery rhymes, Wolfe murmured. Mr. Goodwin, you will ask Mr. Cohen to fetch the application and the specimen. You will also inquire which firm filed it and which associate typed the cover. Law clerks talk when lunch is late. Saul? I asked. Saul, he agreed, to loiter near Croft and Debris and count visitors carrying tote bags. And Fred will sit on 26th again, because our admirer favors routine. He will look not for faces, but for behaviors. The man who looks at his own feet before he looks at cars. Tamsin stayed standing because the chair wouldn't have held her. She looked braced for a kick that wouldn't come yet. Do you think it's Pyle? She asked. I think it is someone who likes to write messages and set scenes, Wolfe said, and I think whoever it is will not resist a summons." He looked at me. "Arrange it, Archie. Tomorrow evening, all of them, Miss Stowe, Mr. Bell, Miss Medeiros, Mr. Creel, Mr. Pyle, and if Mr. Debris can be induced to attend under any pretext, he will be a garnish I will not despise." "You want them all in one room already?" I said. "We've barely tenderized the mystery." "We have tested the bone," he said. "The meat will follow." He flicked the fractured halves on his plate with one finger and watched them separate cleanly again. "You see? The pleasure is in forcing brittle things to admit they were marked before anyone touched them." My phone hummed a second time, a narrow, private sound. Unknown number. I swiped. The message was a photo of our front hall, taken at 4:04 p.m. The frosted pane, my shadow through it, the ghost of Fritz's trolley. Beneath it, block print typed with a font you use when you believe fonts are character. "Still feels, Mr. Goodwin." I handed the phone to Wolfe. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. He could feel it without hands. "Archie," he said, his voice the quiet you get before a verdict. "For once, do not answer." I took Wolfe's instruction like a cork in the mouth, no reply to the photo, and did the only productive thing left. I made appointments sound like subpoenas. People come when you sound like you know the ending. By noon I had 6 yeses and one "my counsel advises," which I translated from CEO into yes. Yara accepted with a tone that implied I'd be graded. Rohan said he would bring documentation no one wanted to read. Alicia said she would bring the logs everyone would skim and regret not memorizing. Gavin said, "Of course," in a way that made me want to count the silver. Tamsin didn't need inviting. She was already pacing in the space where dread turns to purpose. Silas Debris took the prize. He phoned back himself and asked if he might bring a box. "A goodwill gesture," he purred. "Heritage, not hubris." I told him to bring whatever he needed to feel civilized and that he'd submit it to Fritz, who's a stricter customs officer than most frontier posts. Wolfe rearranged the office with the same care a chess problem gets arranged in a book. Chairs by height, not comfort. Light shifted so no one would be accidentally handsome. The plate with the 2 fractured halves permitted to remain as a set piece. He dictated placement cards to me because he likes his enemies to face the right direction while they deny obvious truths. Pyle center-left, where he could try to dominate and feel thwarted. Yara opposite Wolfe, where her angles would miss him. Rohan close enough to the tray to smell it. Alicia within reach of the logs. Gavin in the draft. And, if he came, Debris in the chair that squeaks so lightly a nervous man forgets it isn't him. Lon Cohen rang at 3 with the material Wolfe wanted, and some he hadn't asked for. "Trademark filing by Wexler and Borchardt," Lon said. "Associate of record, Nathan Conroy. Specimen is a mock of Heritage Biscuit packaging with a line that reads, 'Steady under pressure.' Filed 2 days before Hargrove's board met to approve, won't break under pressure." "Who feeds Wexler and Borchardt?" I asked. "Pyle's golf partner sits on their client committee," Lon said. "Also, Yara Stowe freelanced with their PR arm a year ago. If you're keeping lines, you've got one with 2 ends. I thanked him and carried the news into the office like a tray that might spill." Wolfe listened without blinking, then let his eyelids close as if he were tasting a line of poetry for meter. "Conroy," he said. "Make a note. Mr. Panzer will ask what Conroy orders for lunch and who pays when the check arrives." The brownstone, which had been sulking, made a small effort to be helpful. Fritz found a second displacement. A paper band that had been tied in room 3 around a pot now tied a 1/4 inch lower, a neatness no one but Theodore would notice. Theodore noticed. He came down in a fury that would have melted ice on a comet, accused the entire borough of treason, and demanded that I move to a monastery where men kept their hands to themselves. Wolfe let him rage, and then told me to change the service entrance cylinder and to put a strip of hair across the basement bulkhead. He doesn't trust powder. He trusts hair. Saul checked in from the world where people walk. The man with the cap had a trail. He had slid through the station, changed trains twice without sitting, and surfaced near an art supply store on 18th. He went in, stayed 6 minutes, came out without a bag. Saul went in after and asked a board clerk a question that sounded like he didn't care about the answer. The board clerk said yes, they stocked butanone and acetone for plastics. Yes, guys with tidy hands bought droppers. No, he didn't keep names. Yes, sometimes a corporate card paid for hobby goods because office managers buy weird. He also asked where to get blank card stock, Saul added. Clerk pointed him to the back wall and Stapley's down the block. Vanity with a purchasing plan, Wolfe said. Thank you. Fred reported from the 26th that the black Model S had acquired a thin scratch on its bumper that hadn't been there yesterday. Sometimes that is how you identify a man, by what he brushes. He also watched 3 Hargrove staffers use their trunks as closets and one as a gym. Pyle keeps his trunk neat, Fred said. It looks like a magazine, not a car. Vanity of control, Wolfe murmured, not pleased to be consistent. Very well. At 4, the doorbell delivered a man calling himself Hart with a padded envelope and an invoice from Brancusi. This time I was waiting. I opened the envelope on the stoop, waved the paper under his nose, and asked him a childish question. He answered like a child. I don't know, he said. Guy on the corner gives me 20 for dropping those and picking up signed ones. Nice guy. Smelled like lemon. He had a tooth that would never learn its lesson. I took the return envelope he was supposed to bring back to Mr. Nice guy, and inside were 2 20s and a blank card. I kept the money. It wasn't a bribe. It was tuition. Wolfe let me display that on the blotter as if I were a schoolboy who had found an interesting beetle. So, he said, he is rehearsing you. He will stop when the curtain rises. The curtain rose at 8. The first to arrive was Alicia, who wore competence like a coat. She took the chair with the logs on her lap and gave the squeak a glance that told me she'd blame it if we let her. Rohan came next, carrying a folder heavy with proofs and light with conviction. Yara arrived in a dress that had more structure than most bridges and sat where she could stare at Wolfe without letting him stare at her. Pyle came on time and made sure we knew it. He shook my hand with the measured pressure of a man controlling hydraulics and gave Wolfe a nod that wasn't a bow. Gavin spilled in afterward with the still sunny face of a man who believes likability is a force of nature. He had no pelican case. I noted that the room breathed better. Silas Debris entered last, without apology and with a white box that said it would like to have a future. He took the squeak. He winced and then pretended not to wince, which endeared him to me more than anything else he had done. Wolfe didn't rise. He never does. He waited until their noises had settled and their eyes had chosen what to do with themselves. Then he said, "You are in my house. If you want to understand the effect, imagine a judge explaining gravity. It wasn't a welcome. It was jurisdiction." He paused just long enough to instruct their bloodstreams that they would not hurry, and then continued, "You have intruded by proxy already. That is a debt. It will be paid here or elsewhere. We will begin with a demonstration." He glanced at me. I picked up a biscuit, set it on a mat board whose edge Saul had kissed with a tiny line of solvent, and pressed. The snap echoed politely. I set the next biscuit on a clean board and pressed. It yielded. I did it twice more. I didn't look at Yara. I didn't need to. She made a small, contained sound that told me she knew how this would play in a room with bloggers and adjectives. "You see," Wolfe said, "your calamity was not thermodynamics. It was theatre. Pyle cleared his throat with the authority of a gavel. And who is the playwright, Mr. Wolfe? Wolfe looked at him the way a hawk looks at a chipmunk that has asked to see identification. We will answer that. But first, humor me while I remove impossibilities. Miss Medeiros, I have no interest in your logs tonight. They will exonerate you tomorrow. Mr. Bell, you may hold your proofs as a shield if you wish. They will not be pierced. Mr. Creel, you are incompetent, not malignant. Sit still. Miss Stowe. He let her name rest on the air with an almost kindness that wasn't kind. Your hands are visible. Keep them so. Mr. Pyle, do not touch your pocket. Pyle's hand stopped the way a deer stops on hearing a very specific branch crack. Debris gave me a glance sideways that said he was enjoying himself too much to be smart about it. And now, Wolfe said, Mr. Goodwin will pass among you with a trifle. He gestured, and Fritz on cue entered with a silver tray that would have made old Vienna blush. On it sat 6 cards, and beside them a felt-tipped marker I had bought that afternoon at Stapley's. You will each write in block capitals the phrase, "You still feel it," on the card at your place. You will do it with that pen. You will do it now. They looked at him as if he had announced a new tax. But people obey in this room. They always have. One by one they picked up the pen and wrote. The sound of felt on card was softer than a lie, but louder than breathing. I watched their hands. Yara's letters were art-directed. Her E carried its proud tilt. Pyle's print was businesslike and stingy with curves. Rohan's hand wavered, and then still. Alicia printed like a draftsperson who couldn't afford ambiguity. Gavin's were cheerful and careless. Silas, to his credit, didn't try to be different. He wrote like a man who had written notes to himself under pressure and survived. I gathered the cards. On the desk, next to the 2 fractured halves, lay the original. Wolfe closed his eyes and reached for his beer. He didn't need to compare. He had seen the letters before they were written. He set the glass down without drinking, and when he opened his eyes, he didn't look at the desk. He looked at their shoes, then at their pockets, then at their faces. Good, he said softly. Now that we have the chorus, we will hear the solo. Wolfe let the last card dry in the air like a verdict, and then said, Mr. Goodwin, place them. I fanned the 6 fresh block prints in a row beneath the original. You still feel it. The chorus looked back at us in 6 different tempers. Yara's had the proud, slightly upturned top bar on the E. Pyle's rationed ink like it was a shareholder benefit. Alicia's sat on an invisible baseline a surveyor would admire. Rohan's pressed at the mid-strokes as if the paper had to be convinced. Gavin's were an easy Sunday. Fat, friendly, careless. Silas wrote like a man who'd scribbled purchase orders on the hood of a truck and hadn't missed a number. Wolfe didn't bend forward. He doesn't do concessions to paper. This is not handwriting analysis, he said. I am not a graphologist. I am a citizen. Citizen C. Miss Stowe, your E is proud of itself. It's an E, Yara said. They have 3 bars in most civilized alphabets. And yours angles at the crown, Wolfe went on tranquilly. You prefer showing a cent to balance. Your staff reports your bins heavy with shredded card after the first fiasco. Your desk keeps pens in several weights so you may command tone without the nuisance of content. You are the author of slogans that rely on absolutes. You have, how do you say it, aesthetic contempt. That contempt discolors judgment across from him. She held her posture like a line in a magazine spread. If I wanted to make a point about absolutes, I'd write a memo, not rent a solvent. Indeed, Wolfe said. You would not paint seams in a closet. You would hire someone who lives in closets. He let that rest and turned his head a fraction. Mr. Creel, your letters are as amiable as a tiki bar. You owe money you pretend you do not owe. You keep keys to spaces that are not rooms. If someone asked you to be nimble, you would be nimble, and later you would call it flex. Gavin smiled too fast. We all do what events demand. Do we? Wolfe murmured. We shall see. He touched the original card with a fingernail so gently the Philister didn't notice. This was left in Mr. Goodwin's hall while we were all awake. The man who left it was neither proud nor amiable. He was careful. He writes as if bluntness is goodness. He presses hard at the turns. He prefers lines to curves. He buys supplies where clerks are bored. He wears new crepe-soled shoes to avoid telling the floor his weight. He changes his cap, his tote, his route. He uses trunks as closets and closets as stages. He enjoys neat fractures. Pyle's mouth made a shape he might have used on a judge who'd just invented an injunction. Who? Patience, Wolfe said, with a glance that made the word efficient. Mr. Bell, if you had made a brittle line, it would be in service of a test. You would have told someone, your misery is honest. Miss Medeiros, if you had been sloppy, your ledger would show it. It does not. Mr. Debris, if you had done it, you would not have brought a box to my house when you could have sent roses. Silas lifted a hand, palm out, the universal sign for I'll allow this. I did bring a box, he said mildly. Heritage, untreated. If you like, Mr. Wolfe, we will break one on porcelain to demonstrate the decencies. We will, Wolfe said. Later. He looked at Pyle last, which is a courtesy or a trap, depending on your use of chairs. And you, sir, like to keep surfaces clear. Your trunk is a magazine. You do not like keys to be anywhere but where they belong. That makes you useful to other men, and they to you. Before I ask you a question you will not answer, allow me to demonstrate a small fact. He inclined his head at me. I took a biscuit and set it on one of the Gramercy boards Saul had marked in a seam as delicate as a sigh. I pressed. The snap was as neat as the first day. I set another on clean stone. It yielded in flakes. Then I held up the felt marker from Stapley's, uncapped it, and wrote, "You still feel it," on a 7th card on my knee. The room got a gentle dose of solvent and dye and pride. I capped it, stepped to Yara's chair, and held the marker near her wrist. Lemon? I asked. She looked at me with scorn. Bergamot. Close enough for clerks, I said, and crossed to Gavin. His collar had the faint ghost of storage air, dust and detergent and backstage. I sniffed politely near his sleeve. Your sanitizer doesn't smell like this. I crossed to Pyle last. He wears money like other men wear hair, but there are limits to hygiene. I held the pen near his pocket. His nostrils flinched. Not at the smell, at the intrusion. He keeps worlds at distances he can measure. The marker was too close to the perimeter. Enough theatrics, he said softly. If you have a point, make it. Wolfe took pity on him by telling the truth with half of its words. You have been used as a cupboard. Your trunk made a fine dead drop. It is not an accusation. It is a habit. Your man left a duffel, picked up a tote, and walked. Mr. Panzer watched him. Mr. Goodwin, the art store? 18th Street, I said. They sell butanone and acetone for plastics, droppers, and cardstock. The board clerk remembers a corporate card buying hobby supplies. Not a crime, only a color. Just so, Wolfe said. And Mr. Cohen, he glanced toward the phone like Lon was a household god, has provided the delectable coincidence that your competitor filed a mark 2 days before your board met. Your brand chief freelanced with their PR arm, your golf partner recommends their lawyers, and your events man stores secrets in closets. It is almost elegant, Silas coughed lightly. May I say, as a citizen, that elegance is overrated. Sabotage is vulgar, not elegant. Your protest is noted, Wolfe said. Now, the solo. He didn't point. He never points. He built a small, neat ladder out of inconveniences and invited the man to climb it. Mr. Creel, on the day of the first tasting, you asked the venue for storage that was off the sheet. You carried a Pelican case, which, unlike your invoices, was paid for. You are nimble. You have friends who will lend you a dropper and a solvent without a receipt, and you like tricks. Yesterday, while Mr. Goodwin and Mr. Panzer were pacing, you were in the closet where the boards are stacked, making a seam that would wait. Today, when we announced a second demonstration, you came early again. You left through the dock, switched hats, and used a trunk you knew would be ajar. Please, do not lie now. The odor of it would disturb my dinner. Gavin's face did a brief, complicated thing. Panic auditioning for charm. He went for charm. This is insane, he said, in the tone of men about to say something insane. I run events. If a board got marked, a vendor did it, or the venue. I sanitize. I can show you the bottle. Saul appeared in the doorway like a rumor that had paid its rent and become a fact. He held, between two fingers, and a contempt that could sterilize surgical steel, a little glass dropper in a zip bag. Found in a drain behind the dock, he said. Wiped badly. We'll see what chemistry says tomorrow. I followed the man in the cap to the gym lot. He switched a duffel to Miss. Stows? He didn't glance at her. Company trunk. He walked off with a tote. I could name the shoes if that helps Gavin's hand. Went to his ankle in an involuntary, human move no PR man in the world knows how to choreograph. Crepe soles don't show in the mirror. They show in your head when you remember someone describing them. Yara turned her head toward Gavin with genuine surprise that had the ice of self-preservation in it. Gavin, what? He found the floor. Look, he said without finding a point to look at. Somebody asked me to store some things. It's New York. Storage is a business. I didn't paint any. Maybe a tech did. Maybe a freelancer. We hustle. It's not a crime to carry a bag. No, Wolfe said. It is not. And the money? I don't. Mr. Creel, Wolfe said. And for once the softness had the bite of a good knife. Do not be stupid in my office. You are paid to ruin a promise. Who? Gavin's eyes did the coward's math, which is just arithmetic with love subtracted. He looked at Pyle first because money wears a crown. Pyle stared back with the calm of a man who knows he shouldn't blink. Gavin looked at Yara next because theater wears lipstick. Then he did a thing I did not expect and which Wolfe's eyes allowed a fraction of surprise for. He looked at Silas Debris and then slid past him and fixed on Tamsin Hargrove. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Something passed over her features, the ghost of a thing she'd already buried. Gavin swallowed. It wasn't, he began, and stopped because he had picked a cliff without a bridge. Wolfe spared him. No, you're an instrument. The hand is elsewhere. He turned for the first time toward the two fractured halves on his plate and touched them together. They failed to meet as they always had. He let them fall apart and looked up, voice quiet and exact. Ladies and gentlemen, there were two authors of your humiliation, the dramaturge who wrote the line and the stagehand who painted it. We have just heard the stagehand clear his throat. The dramaturge, he let his gaze travel, not to Yara, not to Pyle, not to Debris, and settle instead on the one person in the room who had not written a card and did not owe anyone money, but who had announced at our door that they were right about Mr. Wolfe and had come to test whether he cared. Will tell us why she wanted the promise to fail. The room breathed in. Tamsin's eyes did not flicker. If you want to know how silence breaks, it's with a word you didn't expect to hear yourself say. She said, because it was a lie. It was the kind of line that doesn't echo but stays, sitting in the room like a new piece of furniture no one ordered. Tamsin hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to. Everyone heard it because no one was breathing. Wolfe, of course, didn't look surprised. He never does when he's been waiting for someone to run out of road. He inclined his head a fraction, which for him is a standing ovation. Because it was a lie, he repeated softly, as if testing the tensile strength of the words. Explain. Her eyes weren't defensive, which made them more dangerous. We built a campaign on a promise that couldn't hold. I told Martin, I told Yara. Won't break under pressure. Is empty. It's not science. It's theater. I thought if we staged the failure before the world did, we could pivot. Show humility. Honesty. Get ahead of it. She breathed in. But no one listened. That's not true, Yara snapped. You never... I did, Tamsin cut in, her voice still low but ironed. You said the story was bigger than the biscuit. And Martin said the investors needed absolutes. And Rohan said the bake could take it, but he wasn't sure. And Alicia said logistics couldn't promise a perfect line. But still we went ahead. So, yes, I found someone who could make the failure happen at the right time, in the right way. A break instead of a crumble. Neat, visible, ironic, Gavin shifted in his chair like he wanted to disappear into his crepe soles. You didn't tell me it was for irony, he muttered. You didn't ask, she said. You just wanted to clear your debt. Silas Debris gave a little laugh that was almost elegant if you liked vultures. My congratulations, he said. You hired sabotage as brand strategy. Admirable efficiency. You should be working for us. Shut up, Silas, Tamsin said, not even looking at him. Pyle's jaw had frozen in the shape of corporate gravitas. He spoke like a man dictating the minutes of his own downfall. This is absurd. Miss Hargrove, you're admitting to engineering an intentional product failure. Do you understand the liability you're announcing? Yes, she said. Better than you do, because if it had worked, if it had looked like an honest stumble, we could have pulled back, recalibrated, and still kept the chain. Instead, it spread like poison because Gavin couldn't keep his closet straight. Now it's worse. But the lie would have been worse still. You had no right, Yara hissed. I had the obligation, Tamsin said. The silence that followed wasn't ordinary. It was the kind where half the room is calculating who has the cleanest lawyer, and the other half is wondering whether Wolfe is going to open his mouth and turn them into anecdotes. Wolfe did. Obligation, he said. An interesting word. Miss Hargrove, you presume to act against your employer, against your colleagues, against the very thing you were sworn to protect. And yet, you're not wrong. It was a lie. The line, the campaign, the arrogance of absolutes. It would have collapsed in a mess. You chose fracture over crumble. You sought to control humiliation. You thought you were wise. You were merely reckless. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. She had already chosen her hill. Pyle rose because CEOs believe standing makes them taller than the facts. Mr. Wolfe, I want it on record that this is her confession. She is terminated, effective immediately, and the company will... Sit, Wolfe said. He didn't raise his voice, but the command landed with the authority of gravity. Pyle sat, which was the most honest thing he had done all evening. The record, Wolfe continued, is that 2 crimes were committed. 1. Deliberate sabotage of a commercial product. 2. Deliberate intrusion into this house. Miss Hargrove admits the first, if with philosophy. Mr. Creel committed the second, with cheer. The former is a question for your counsel. The latter is a debt for me. His eyes closed, then opened with that slow, deliberate blink that means the gavel has dropped. Archie, call Mr. Kramer. Tell him to bring a bag for Mr. Creel. He will deny, of course. But Saul has seen him. Fred has tracked him. The drain has given up its dropper, and his shoes have betrayed him. The district attorney will be amused. As for Miss Hargrove, she has given you, Mr. Pyle, a story you may prefer to the one you had. She will not be arrested in this house. Not tonight. Tamsin flinched. Not from fear, but from relief she didn't want to own. Gavin, on the other hand, sagged as if his strings had been cut. The cheerful mask had slipped for good. Kramer arrived 20 minutes later with Sergeant Stebbins, both of them looking like they'd been promised indigestion. Kramer didn't like being summoned, but he liked the evidence Saul handed him less. He grunted, snapped at Gavin, and when the man tried to protest, he had cuffs on his wrists quicker than you could say adjacent felony. Gavin's eyes darted toward Tamsin once, but she didn't return the glance. After they left, Wolfe sat back with a sigh that could have been about jurisprudence or digestion. "Phooey," he said at last. "They always think a break is neater than a crumble." Silas rose with his squeaking chair and bowed a little too low. "An instructive evening, Mr. Wolfe? If ever you wish to consult on biscuit philosophy, our door's open." "Close it," Wolfe said without looking at him. The rest trickled out under Fritz's careful herding. Yara's heels struck the floor like accusations. Pyle muttered about counsel. Rohan carried his folder like a flag of surrender. Alicia gave me a look that said at least one person in the room respected the difference between sabotage and logistics. Tamsin left last. She paused in the doorway, not asking forgiveness, not asking anything. Just pausing, as if to mark that she had stood here and told the truth no one else would. When the door shut, Wolfe leaned forward and plucked the two fractured halves from the plate. He pressed them together once more, and once more they failed to meet. He let them drop. "Archie," he said, "a biscuit that breaks is still a biscuit. But a man who thinks he can decide how it breaks is a fool." I said, "You could put that on a campaign." He gave me a look that could have soured a vineyard. "Confound campaigns. Bring beer." And just like that, the brownstone began to breathe again. The air felt clean, the walls held, and the sanctity was back in place. Dinner would be served, justice had been done, and Wolfe had restored the order that had been trespassed. For my part, I couldn't resist one final note in the record. "Still," I told him as I went for the beer, "if anyone ever writes another slogan about not breaking under pressure, I'm sending them here with a plate." The Gazette put the fiasco above the fold the next morning, which did wonders for Fritz's blood pressure and nothing for my appetite. I brought the paper in with the mail and found Wolfe doing what he always does after a case trips over our threshold. Sitting, eyes half-lidded, pretending to read while he replays every footstep we let inside. He didn't ask for a summary. He doesn't ask when he already knows. Kramer called first, voice graveled by satisfaction. "Chemistry on the dropper. A butanone blend cut with cheap acetone, hobby grade, residue on 2 Gramercy boards that matched the seam Saul had found." The venue's camera caught a cap and mask entering the dock twice in 20 minutes. The shoes were new crepe, the gait consistent with a man who carries his shoulders like a problem. The art store clerk remembered a corporate card that didn't belong to a hobbyist. The signature on the slip was G. Creel, as elegant as a marching band. "We'll pin him without your poetry," Kramer said. "But if you've got more poetry, we'll take it." "Save room for dessert," I told him. "We have a courier who will sing lemon and a trunk that doubles as a post office." "Yeah," he said. "We've got the courier. Your heart is a delivery freelancer whose honesty depends on lunch. He'll say nice guy until we show him a photo lineup, and then he'll say that guy. And the guy will look a lot like your events friend with a hat. As for the trunk, if the CEO wants to keep it open, he can explain to the board why his car has better foot traffic than his lobby." He hung up before the part where he thanks Wolfe, which is a friendly tradition of ours. By 10, Saul had dropped a manila folder on my desk that could have served as a doorstop. Inside were stills from the deli camera across our street at 4:04 yesterday. A figure half-turned at the frosted pane, phone raised, the polite silhouette of a cap brim. Another still showed the Brancusi runner at our stoop an hour earlier. Behind him, 3 car lengths down, a man in a knit cap reading a newspaper with his eyes. "He planted your photo op and your prop," Saul said, "proud of his choreography." The hair at the bulkhead moved at 4:01. Not cut, parted and replaced. He likes neat. Wolfe grunted. He doesn't prefer praise in the morning unless it's for Fritz. Tamsin came just before 11, carrying a brown envelope the way some people carry a leash no one sees. She asked to speak to Wolfe alone, which is not a privilege we grant lightly. But he nodded, and I sat in the front room within earshot by habit and profession. They talked low. What I heard was enough. She intended to resign before anyone could theatrically accept it. She would tell the board her rationale, which had the virtue of being both true and fatal. Wolfe told her, in that calm needlepoint of his, that truth without prudence is just another vanity, and that staging honesty is a cousin of staging lies. She accepted the needle without flinching. Then she put the envelope on his blotter. "Your fee," she said, "and a line item for the nuisance I introduced to your life." He didn't touch it. "You introduced a nuisance and removed a delusion," he said. "The accounts are not equal, but I will not haggle. Mr. Goodwin will receipt you." She rose. "Do you think I'm wrong?" "You are wrong in method," he said. "In motive you are merely alone." After she left, I asked, "You believe her? No shadow employer, no Silas with a retainer under the table?" If Mr. Debris had purchased this, he would have hidden his hand better and come to gloat later, Wolfe said. He came last night to observe the size of the hole and to see whether it would fit his foot. He is not a philanthropist. He is a scavenger. There is a distinction, Lon rang next with a headline he wanted me to admire. I didn't. But he had useful meat. Wexler and Borchardt had suspended their over-eager associate, Conroy. The heritage filing would proceed, but with language scrubbed of pressure. The cafe chain was reassessing timelines, which translated to they were going to buy whatever public opinion told them was least likely to get their floor sticky. "Off the record," Lon said, "the board wants a head without blood. Your girl volunteered hers. Pyle will keep his, for now, Yara. She'll freelance the apology. Rohan, he'll be in a lab until he remembers what food tastes like. Alicia, she'll run logistics like God intended, with a pencil and a conscience. And Gavin? Arraignment at 2, Lon said. Your Kramer is in a mood to educate. When the phone stopped being a metronome, the brownstone remembered how to be a house. Theodore grumbled about air that had been touched and returned to his bowers. Fritz polished the range as if it had been impolite yesterday. The kitchen clock reclaimed the tempo. Wolfe watched the plate on the desk, like a man watching a stage after the curtain has fallen, waiting to see if the actors remembered to die. At 5, Pyle phoned from a private number that made privacy look like an expense account. He asked for Wolfe and got me, which he deserved. "Convey to Mr. Wolfe," he said in the tone of a memo, "that Hargrove Foods will handle the civil aspects. We will not press charges for the Iki's intrusions into his residence if he declines further public comment. I told him Wolfe would decline no such thing. Wolfe declines selectively and for cause." The line went silent long enough to show me the shape of a scowl I wouldn't get to see. "Then convey," he said, "that we are grateful." I conveyed. Wolfe said, "Pfui," which translated here to the observation that gratitude is a dish best kept off our table. Dinner was veal with morels and a salad that had the quiet confidence of Fritz's best work. Fritz set a plate of biscuits on the sideboard without flourish. Wolfe waited until the veal had proven itself, then reached for a biscuit like a judge choosing a case to ruin. He pressed with 2 fingers. It yielded and flaked. He nodded once. Not at Fritz, who needs no endorsement, but at the universe for remembering the rules. "Men," he said, "seek absolutes to spare themselves the labor of thought. Won't break under pressure is not a promise. It is a lullaby. Adults prefer the truth. Some things yield properly, some break, most crumble, and a few, by art, endure. Food, like character, must be made for its pressures, not to advertise against them. I buttered mine and let him hear me enjoy it. If you keep talking like that, we'll have philosophers camping on the stoop. Let them, he said. We will feed them and send them away wiser. And lighter of wallet, we had coffee in the office because coffee belongs there. The plate with the two neat halves sat exactly where it had sat for days. I thought about palming it, giving the symbol a vacation. Wolfe lifted his eyes as if he had heard me thinking and said, "Leave it." Souvenir? Instruction, he said. For me, to remember that vanity dresses itself as virtue. For you, to remember that nearness is not intimacy. An intruder may learn a house and never understand it. That's very needlepoint, I said. Want I should cross-stitch it for the hall? He ignored me, which is love in the language he speaks. The phone rang once more. Kramer again, brief, charge sheet filed. Creel cooperating enough to get a smaller room, the DA amused, as promised. And your kitchen, he added grudgingly. We'll have a man look at that back bulkhead. Not because you need us, because the next idiot who tries a door should get a surprise that doesn't require a philosopher. Send a man with small feet, I advised. After the last cup, the brownstone closed ranks the way a good body heals. Windows remembered how to be shy. The orchids above exhaled the damp, sane breath that means Theodore will sleep. Fritz set tomorrow's mice in neat, comforting rows. Wolfe took his chair back from the day and let it have him. I wrote the final line of the record and shut the book. The phone that had sent me the corridor photo hadn't buzzed again, which meant Gavin had lost his props and the theater was closed. If he ever tried his cap again, it wouldn't be at our door. Archie, Wolfe said. Yes? Do not buy mat boards. I'll stick to porcelain, I said. It forgives better. And one more thing, he added. Gaze on the halves, voice like a soft gavel. If a man insists that nothing breaks under pressure, the decent thing is to introduce him to pressure. Happy to, I said. We have a plate. The brownstone had its silence back, but it was a different silence than the one before the biscuit broke. It was layered now, like a chord. Relief, aftermath, and the faint echo of trespass. Fritz's kitchen was orderly again. Theodore had sworn that no hand had dared brush a pot since, and I could feel the house exhaling, like a body letting go of a fever. Even the air in the office seemed steadier, as though it had finished listening and could rest. Wolfe hadn't moved the fractured halves from the tray. He let them stay, a reminder, or maybe a warning. I'd learned not to ask which. He had returned to his chair as though it were a throne reclaimed after siege, eyes half shut, beer within reach, the orchids upstairs secure again in their realm. I sat opposite with the last of my notes, wondering if there was anything left to write. Kramer had what he wanted. Gavin Creel would serve as an object lesson in how not to use closets as theaters. Tamsin Hargrove had told her truth and would pay for it in the only currency corporate life respects, exile with a pension of guilt. Yara would polish her sentences into apologies, Pyle would continue in his delusion that control was the same as virtue, and Silas Debris, well, scavengers always find new bones. What lingered wasn't the sabotage or even the neat fracture lines painted with a dropper's care. It was the trespass. Someone had entered Wolfe's sanctum, shifted Fritz's spice jar, broken a biscuit on his desk, and left a calling card in our hall. That wasn't strategy. That was a hand in a pocket it didn't own. Wolfe, I said finally, because he wasn't going to speak first. You ever get used to it? The part where people drag their schemes in here like mud on shoes? His lids lifted, heavy and patient. No. That was all, but it was enough. He reached forward, touched the two halves on the plate, and for the last time tried to fit them together. They refused. He let them fall back, separate and neat. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "a biscuit is meant to flake, not to endure. To demand absolutes of it is to court humiliation. Men are no different. When they insist upon invulnerability, they announce precisely where they will break." I said, "That's philosophy, not dessert." He closed his eyes again. "It is both." Dinner that night was roast duck, and Fritz set the plates down with a serenity that made the day's mess feel like rumor. Wolfe ate slowly, as always, savoring. He ended with another biscuit, this one Fritz's, perfect, golden, yielding at the edge of his fork. It flaked the way it was meant to, not the way it had been forced to. Wolfe gave a single nod. "That," he said, "is pressure properly borne." I jotted it in my notebook. Not for the record, not even for the Gazette, but for myself. Because in our line, it isn't the arrests or the headlines that stay with you. It's the quiet moments after, when Wolfe has drawn the line, Fritz has restored the kitchen, and the brownstone is itself again. That's when you know justice, whatever shape it takes, has settled. And if another courier ever tries the Brancusi trick, I'll be waiting at the door, with a biscuit, on porcelain. The brownstone held. The silence returned. And justice, Wolfe's kind, measured and immovable, was served, 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 was served.